May 1945. Germany is burning. The Third Reich has 12 days left to exist, and somewhere in the Bavarian Alps, 125 of the most dangerous scientists on Earth are waiting. Not for rescue, not for justice. They are waiting to be recruited. These men built the weapons that killed 9,000 civilians in London, Antwerp, and Paris. They used slave labor, 20,000 concentration camp prisoners, to do it. At least 6,000 of those prisoners died building their rockets. And within 6 months, every single one of those scientists will be on American soil, given new identities, given laboratories, given salaries paid by the United States government. This is not fiction. This is Operation Paperclip, and it was classified for 40 years. If you want the full, declassified story of how America hired the engineers of the Holocaust to win the space race, hit that like button and subscribe to History Unclassified. Every file in this story was real. Most of it was never supposed to reach you. To understand Operation Paperclip, you need to understand one place. Mittelwerk, underground factory, Harz Mountains, central Germany. Carved into a mountain by prisoners from the Dora concentration camp. Tunnel A, Tunnel B. 46 cross tunnels. 1.3 miles of underground production line. Inside that mountain, 1,400 V-2 ballistic missiles were assembled between 1943 and 1945. Each one 46 feet tall, 28,000 pounds at launch. A 1-ton warhead traveling at 3,500 miles per hour. No warning, no sound until after impact. The man who designed them was Wernher von Braun, SS Sturmbannführer, Major, age 33 in 1945. Member of the Nazi Party since 1937. Member of the SS since 1940. Von Braun did not run from the Americans. He chose them, deliberately, strategically, cold-bloodedly. He had one priority. Not Germany, not the Reich. Rockets. Whoever gave him the budget, the facilities, and the freedom, he would work for them. And in May 1945, that person was about to become President Harry S. Truman. But there was a problem, a very specific problem. Executive order. Truman had signed a directive. No former Nazis, no SS members, no war criminals. Under no circumstances would the United States government employ individuals with more than nominal Nazi Party participation. Von Braun had been a member for 8 years. He had personally toured Mittelwerk. He had watched prisoners die building his rockets. His file was an automatic disqualification. So the men running this operation did something extraordinary. They simply changed the files. April 11, 1945. U.S. Army soldiers of the 104th Infantry Division arrive at Camp Dora. What they find is beyond anything in their briefing documents. Hundreds of corpses, piled near the tunnel entrance. Prisoners so emaciated their uniforms hang off bones. The ovens at the camp crematorium are still warm. The soldiers photograph everything. The evidence is overwhelming, undeniable, and official. It goes into the files of the Judge Advocate General's Corps. War crimes documentation, to be used at Nuremberg. And simultaneously, a completely separate set of American officers arrives at the same location. Different unit, different mission, different orders entirely. These men are not looking for evidence. They are looking for engineers. The operation had a name before it became Paperclip. Operation Overcast. Launched in July 1945. Objective: identify, extract, and exploit German scientific and technical expertise before the Soviets could reach it. The military framing was clean. Temporary exploitation only. 6 months maximum. Scientists would be debriefed, their knowledge extracted, then returned to face the Allied denazification process. That was the official version. What actually happened was something else entirely. Because the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, the JIOA, had already made a decision that was never written into the official orders. These scientists were not going back. May 2, 1945. The village of Rute, Austria. Wernher von Braun and 7 members of his rocket team walk toward an American private named Fred Schneikert. Von Braun's arm is in a cast, fractured in 2 places from a car accident 6 weeks earlier, fleeing westward, away from the Soviets. He speaks in careful English. "We are German scientists. We want to surrender." Schneikert does not know what to do. He takes them to his commanding officer. His commanding officer does not know what to do. Within 48 hours, that message has reached Colonel Holger Toftoy, Chief of Ordnance Technical Intelligence. Toftoy knows exactly what to do. The debriefings begin immediately, and what the Americans learn in the first 72 hours changes the entire calculus of the operation. Von Braun has not only surrendered himself, he has surrendered 14 tons of classified V2 technical documents. His team had hidden them in an abandoned mine shaft in the Harz Mountains. 14 tons. Blueprint drawings, combustion chamber designs, guidance system specifications, wind tunnel data, everything needed to build an intercontinental ballistic missile. The Americans had the man. They had the documents. Now they needed to make sure the Soviets got neither. Here is the problem. The Mittelwerk factory, and everything in it, sits in what is about to become the Soviet occupation zone. The border agreement was already signed at Yalta. American forces have until June 1, 1945 to withdraw. That gives Colonel Toftoy's team less than 7 weeks. 7 weeks to extract 341 tons of V2 components, 14 tons of documents, and over 100 of the most valuable scientists in the world, before handing the entire facility to the Red Army. Operation Paperclip's predecessor, Operation Lusty, had already stripped the Mittelwerk of 100 complete V2 rockets, loaded onto 341 railcars, shipped to the port of Antwerp, loaded onto 16 Liberty ships, bound for White Sands Proving Ground, New Mexico. The rockets left before the deadline. The scientists were next, but getting them out of Germany legally, that was a different problem entirely. Because Truman's executive order was still in force, and every single one of the scientists on the JIOA's list had a file that should have stopped them at the border. What the JIOA did next was technically a federal crime. They called it papering the files. Every Nazi Party membership record, removed. Every SS affiliation, reclassified or deleted. War crimes mentions, redacted. In the case of Arthur Rudolph, Chief Operations Director of the Mittelwerk, a man who had personally requisitioned slave laborers from the SS, his file was amended to read, "No evidence found of Nazi Party membership beyond nominal involvement." Arthur Rudolph had been a member since 1931. He joined 4 years before Hitler came to power. In the case of Kurt Diebes, future director of Kennedy Space Center, a man who had reported a colleague to the Gestapo for making anti-Nazi remarks, his file was cleared. In the case of Wernher von Braun himself, whose SS membership, whose presence at Mittelwerk, whose use of slave labor was all documented in American military files, the JIOA summary read, "No security objection." What the JIOA did next was technically a federal crime. They called it papering the files. Every Nazi Party membership record, removed. Every SS affiliation, reclassified or deleted. War crimes mentions, redacted. In the case of Arthur Rudolph, Chief Operations Director of the Mittelwerk, a man who had personally requisitioned slave laborers from the SS, his file was amended to read, "No evidence found of Nazi Party membership beyond nominal involvement." Arthur Rudolph had been a member since 1931. He joined 4 years before Hitler came to power. In the case of Kurt Diebes, future director of Kennedy Space Center, a man who had reported a colleague to the Gestapo for making anti-Nazi remarks, his file was cleared. In the case of Wernher von Braun himself, whose SS membership, whose presence at Mittelwerk, whose use of slave labor was all documented in American military files, the JIOA summary read, "No security objection." What the JIOA did next was technically a federal crime. They called it papering the files. Every Nazi Party membership record, removed. Every SS affiliation, reclassified or deleted. War crimes mentions, redacted. In the case of Arthur Rudolph, Chief Operations Director of the Mittelwerk, a man who had personally requisitioned slave laborers from the SS, his file was amended to read, "No evidence found of Nazi Party membership beyond nominal involvement." Arthur Rudolph had been a member since 1931. He joined 4 years before Hitler came to power. In the case of Kurt Diebes, future director of Kennedy Space Center, a man who had reported a colleague to the Gestapo for making anti-Nazi remarks, his file was cleared. In the case of Wernher von Braun himself, whose SS membership, whose presence at Mittelwerk, whose use of slave labor was all documented in American military files, the JIOA summary read, "No security objection." The files were altered, the order was violated, and 127 German scientists were approved for transfer to the United States. Truman was never told the full picture. The State Department was bypassed. The War Department signed off. And on September 20, 1945, the first 7 scientists from Operation Paperclip landed at Fort Strong, Boston Harbor, Massachusetts. They were not arrested. They were not interrogated as war criminals. They were given a military escort, taken to their new laboratories, and handed a paycheck. America had just hired the engineers of the Holocaust. And the worst part? It was only the beginning. Fort Bliss, Texas, January 1946. 127 German scientists are now on American soil. Officially, they are classified as War Department Special Employees. Not prisoners, not detainees, employees. Their base salary, $6 per day, plus housing, meals, and laboratory access. They are not permitted to leave the base without an armed escort. Their mail is monitored. Their phone calls are logged. But their laboratories are fully funded, and their work begins immediately. Between April 1946 and June 1951, the Paperclip team at White Sands launches 67 V-2 rockets. Not as weapons, as data collection platforms, upper atmosphere research, telemetry experiments, guidance system refinement. Each launch teaches the Americans something the Soviets do not yet know, or so they believe. Because 1,500 miles east of White Sands, in the ruins of Mittelwerk itself, the Soviets have their own program running. And it is moving faster than anyone in Washington wants to admit. Here is what Washington did not know in 1945. The Soviets had their own rocket program already running. Operation Osoaviakhim, October 22, 1946. A single night. Soviet Security Forces, MGB, predecessor to the KGB, simultaneously raid 92 locations across the Eastern Occupation Zone. They arrest 2,200 German scientists, engineers, and technicians, with their families, loaded onto trains within hours. Destination: classified Soviet research facilities deep inside Russia. Not invited. Not given paychecks. Taken. Among the scientists taken that night was Helmut Grotrup, V-2 guidance systems specialist. He had actually approached the Americans first. They turned him down. The Soviets did not. By 1947, Grotrup and his team are working alongside Sergei Korolev, the Soviet rocket genius who had survived Stalin's gulags and was now building the most advanced rocket program on Earth. The Americans had the better scientists. The Soviets had the better hunger. And by 1949, that hunger was producing results that would terrify the entire Western world. August 29, 1949. The Soviet Union detonates its first nuclear weapon, Jo-1. Codename assigned by American intelligence. Location: Semipalatinsk Test Site, Kazakhstan. Yield: 22 kilotons. Comparable to the bomb that destroyed Nagasaki. The Americans expected this, but not until 1953 at the earliest. The Soviets were 4 years ahead of schedule. Truman addresses the nation on September 23, 1949. He confirms the Soviet test. He does not explain how it happened so fast. The classified explanation was already being assembled by the FBI. Klaus Fuchs, British theoretical physicist, Los Alamos veteran, passed nuclear weapon design data to Soviet intelligence from 1944 onward. Arrested January 1950. Confessed within days. But even without Fuchs, the Soviets were building something that stolen blueprints alone could not explain. They were building rockets. Long-range, accurate, capable of carrying a nuclear warhead from Soviet territory to an American city. The missile gap was no longer theoretical. It was real. And in Washington, that fact changed everything about Operation Paperclip. What had started as a 6-month exploitation program was now America's primary strategic insurance policy. The scientists were not going home. They were getting promoted. April 1950. The Paperclip scientists are relocated. Fort Bliss to Redstone Arsenal, Huntsville, Alabama. Better facilities, bigger budget, broader mandate. And for the first time, they are being asked to build something new. Not just analyze captured German hardware, design American weapons. The project, Redstone Missile. Surface-to-surface ballistic missile. 200-mile range. Nuclear capable. First launch target, 1953. Lead engineer, Wernher Von Braun. Von Braun thrives. He is not merely an engineer at Redstone Arsenal. He is a celebrity. In February 1955, still technically a special employee with restricted movement, he appears on American national television. Disneyland, Man in Space, watched by 42 million Americans. He explains the future of space exploration. He draws diagrams on a chalkboard. He smiles for the camera. He is charming, brilliant, completely disarming. And not a single viewer knows he once held the rank of SS Major. Not a single viewer knows that 6 months before Germany's surrender, von Braun attended a meeting at the Dora concentration camp to personally inspect the quality of prisoner labor on his rocket assembly line. That detail is still in a classified file at the Department of Defense. It will stay there for another 30 years. By 1952, the cover-up has layers. The JIOA maintains classified dossiers on every paperclip scientist. The real files, the ones with SS records, Gestapo affiliations, war crimes mentions, are stored separately from the employment files, accessible only to a handful of cleared personnel. The State Department has been asking questions since 1947. Samuel Klaus, State Department legal officer, repeatedly flags the program. His memos are ignored. Then his access is restricted. Then he is removed from the review process entirely. The State Department's own immigration laws are explicit. Any individual who assisted the enemy during wartime is inadmissible to the United States. The JIOA's response to this is breathtaking in its simplicity. They redefine assisted the enemy. In internal memos, classified until 1984, the JIOA argues that German scientists who worked for the Nazi war machine were not assisting an enemy of the United States, because the United States was not yet at war with Germany when many of them joined the party. It is legal gymnastics. It is also effective. By 1955, 765 German and Austrian scientists, engineers, and technicians have entered the United States under Operation Paperclip. Not 127. The program had expanded sixfold from its original scope, and it is still growing. Here is where Operation Paperclip stops being a military secret and becomes something woven into the fabric of American industry. By the mid-1950s, Paperclip scientists are not just at government facilities. They are inside private corporations. Rocketdyne, North American Aviation's Propulsion Division, General Electric, Aeronautical Research Division, Martin Company, Ballistic Missile Development, Aerojet, Solid Fuel Rocket Propulsion. Their knowledge, extracted from classified German research under a federal operation, is being transferred directly into the American industrial base. Without public disclosure, without congressional oversight, without the knowledge of the American workers who will build the hardware those designs produce. And at the center of all of it, always, is Wernher von Braun. In 1956, he is appointed chief of the Ballistic Missile Agency at Redstone Arsenal. He oversees a team of 130 engineers. 40 of them are former Paperclip recruits. That year, his team's proposal for a satellite launch vehicle, Project Orbiter, is rejected by the Eisenhower administration. Too aggressive. Too visible. The Pentagon wants a civilian program for propaganda purposes. Von Braun is told to wait. He waits. But not for long. Because on October 4, 1957, the Soviets end the argument. For everyone. October 4, 1957, 8:28 p.m., Moscow time. The Soviet Union launches Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. 184 pounds, 23 inches in diameter, orbital altitude, 577 miles. It completes one full orbit of the Earth every 96 minutes. And as it passes over American territory, which it does 7 times on its first day, it transmits a radio signal that every amateur operator in the United States can pick up on a shortwave receiver. Beep, beep, beep. It is the sound of American technological supremacy ending. The political fallout is immediate and catastrophic. Senate Majority Leader Lyndon B. Johnson calls an emergency session. He describes the Soviet achievement as potentially more significant than the first atomic bomb. The CIA's assessment, classified at the time, is blunt. The rocket that put Sputnik into orbit, the R-7 Semyorka, is capable of carrying a 3-megaton nuclear warhead from Soviet territory to any city in the continental United States. Range: 5,500 miles. Accuracy: sufficient. America has no equivalent. Not yet. The phone call reaches Von Braun within 24 hours of the Sputnik launch. Neil McElroy, newly confirmed Secretary of Defense, is visiting Redstone Arsenal for a routine facility tour. He is standing in Von Braun's building when the news breaks. Von Braun's response is immediate. "We could have done this 18 months ago." He is not wrong. Project Orbiter, his proposal for an American satellite launch, rejected by the Eisenhower administration in 1955, had been ready. The hardware existed. The team existed. The calculations were done. Washington had chosen a different vehicle, the Vanguard rocket, developed by the Naval Research Laboratory, for political optics. Vanguard was American, clean, no German connections. It was also, as the world was about to find out, not ready. December 6, 1957. Vanguard TV3, America's answer to Sputnik. Watched live on national television. It clears the launch pad by 4 feet. Then it falls back. Then it explodes. The international press calls it Flopnik, Kaputnik, Stay Putnik. The Soviet delegate to the United Nations publicly offers America access to the Soviet program for technical assistance to underdeveloped nations. The humiliation is complete. And in Huntsville, Alabama, an SS major turned American celebrity is waiting for his phone to ring. It rings the next morning. January 31, 1958. Explorer 1, America's first successful satellite launch. Rocket, Jupiter C. Von Braun's design, his team, his calculations. The satellite reaches orbit in 6 minutes, 49 seconds after launch. Orbital altitude, 1,585 miles at apogee. Mission duration, 111 days. Scientific payload, a cosmic ray detector designed by physicist James Van Allen. That detector discovers the radiation belts surrounding the Earth. They are named, to this day, the Van Allen belts. America is back in the space race. And Wernher von Braun is on the front page of every newspaper in the country. Von Braun's public rehabilitation is total. He is the face of American ambition. The man who will take humanity to the stars. Time magazine names him one of the most important scientists in America. He gives speeches at universities. He consults on science fiction films. He testifies before Congress, not as a war crime suspect, but as a national treasure. Congress listens. And on July 29, 1958, Eisenhower signs the National Aeronautics and Space Act. NASA is born. Von Braun's team at Redstone Arsenal becomes the nucleus of what will become the Marshall Space Flight Center. He is appointed its first director. The SS Major is now running America's civilian space program. And not one word of his classified background appears in a single press release. The cover-up holds through the 1950s. But covers never hold forever. The first serious crack appears in 1959. A journalist. Tom Bauer is still years away. But the groundwork is being laid by a network of Holocaust survivors, war crimes investigators, and former concentration camp prisoners, who have never stopped documenting what happened at Dora. The Dora trial, the Nuremberg follow-on proceedings specifically targeting Mittelwerk personnel, had concluded in 1947. Of the 19 defendants tried, one received the death sentence. It was commuted. Von Braun was never indicted, never called as a witness. His name appeared in the evidence files. His presence at the camp was documented. The decision not to pursue him was made at the highest levels of the U.S. Army. Classified. Sealed. Filed away. Jean-Michel, French citizen. Prisoner number 19,880 at Camp Dora. Survived the Mittelwerk. In 1975, he publishes a memoir, Dora. In it, he describes the conditions in precise, documented detail. The 60-hour work shifts underground. The hangings, carried out inside the tunnel assembly area, in front of the workforce, as a productivity measure. The 6,000 dead. And he names the man who ran the program. The same man whose face is on the side of the Saturn V rocket at the Marshall Space Flight Center. Wernher von Braun. The book sells across Europe. In the United States, it is largely ignored, for now. July 16, 1969. Apollo 11. Kennedy Space Center, Florida. The Saturn V rocket carries Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins toward the moon. The rocket was built by von Braun's team. The F-1 engines, 5 of them, each producing 1.5 million pounds of thrust, are the direct descendants of the combustion chamber technology developed at Peenemünde under the Nazi rocket program. The guidance system lineage traces back to the same engineers who built the V-2's inertial navigation. On July 20, 1969, 102 hours and 45 minutes after launch, Neil Armstrong steps onto the surface of the moon. 600 million people watch on television. It is the single greatest technological achievement in human history. And it is built, in significant part, on the work of men who used slave labor to manufacture weapons of terror. This is the central, unresolvable tension of Operation Paperclip. The moon landing is real. The slave labor is real. Both are true simultaneously. And for 24 years, from 1945 to 1969, the United States government ensured that the American public never had to hold both truths at once. That was about to change. Because 3 weeks after Apollo 11, a single article appears in a small American newspaper, written by an investigative journalist who has been pulling classified threads for 2 years. And what she has found is going to make the front page of every major publication in America. Her name is Eileen Welsome, and she is just getting started. The full unraveling of Operation Paperclip does not begin with a senator. It does not begin with a whistleblower inside the CIA. It begins with a single journalist at the Albuquerque Tribune. Eileen Welsome, staff reporter, no security clearance, no classified sources. Just a filing cabinet at the National Archives that someone forgot to fully restrict. In 1985, she begins investigating a different story entirely. Secret human radiation experiments conducted on American citizens in the 1940s and 1950s. And in the footnotes of those documents, she finds names. German names. With American government employment records attached. She pulls the thread. What Welsome uncovers over the next 4 years is the operational architecture of the cover-up in full. The JIOA's file alteration program. The State Department's systematic exclusion from oversight. The specific cases, names, dates, documented Nazi affiliations, of scientists who should never have passed an immigration check. She finds Arthur Rudolph's original Mittelwerk file, the one that documents his direct role in requisitioning 5,764 concentration camp prisoners from the SS for rocket assembly work. She finds the SS personnel file of Georg Ricke, general manager of Mittelwerk, who was actually arrested by American authorities in 1947, tried at the Dora trial, then acquitted and quietly returned to work for the U.S. Army. She finds the documentation of Kurt Blome, Nazi biological weapons researcher, tried at Nuremberg in the doctor's trial, acquitted, then hired by the U.S. Army Chemical Corps in 1951 to continue biological warfare research. Not a rocket scientist, a biological weapons developer. Acquitted at Nuremberg. Hired by America. The scope of Paperclip is larger than anyone has publicly acknowledged. Arthur Rudolph. By 1980, he is 73 years old. Retired. Living in San Jose, California. He has had a remarkable American career. Project manager for the Pershing missile program. Project manager for the Saturn V rocket, the vehicle that took Americans to the moon. Recipient of the NASA Distinguished Service Medal. American citizen since 1954. In 1982, the Department of Justice, Office of Special Investigations, the same unit hunting Nazi war criminals in hiding, opens a case file on Arthur Rudolph. Case number classified. Lead investigator, Neil Schur. The evidence they present to Rudolph in a series of meetings between 1982 and 1984 is drawn directly from his own wartime records. His signature on SS requisition forms for prisoner labor. His attendance records at Mittelwerk during the period when prisoners were being hanged in the assembly tunnels. A 1944 document in which he personally requests more concentration camp labor to meet production quotas. Rudolph does not go to trial. The DOJ gives him a choice. Face denaturalization proceedings, which would strip him of his American citizenship and expose him to potential criminal prosecution. Or renounce his citizenship voluntarily and leave the United States. On November 26, 1983, Arthur Rudolph, NASA medal recipient, Saturn V project manager, signs the paperwork. He boards a flight to Hamburg, West Germany. He never returns. He is 76 years old. The NASA Distinguished Service Medal is not revoked. His contribution to the moon landing is not erased from the official record. He simply, quietly, disappears from American soil. And the Department of Justice issues a 2-paragraph press release. No Senate hearing, no public trial, no front page. 2 paragraphs. Von Braun does not live to see the full reckoning. In January 1970, 6 months after Apollo 11, NASA undergoes a brutal round of budget cuts. The moon race is won. Congress loses interest. Von Braun's Marshall Space Flight Center budget is slashed by 30% in a single fiscal year. His proposal for a crewed Mars mission, his life's ultimate ambition beyond the moon, is rejected outright. He is offered a desk job in Washington, Deputy Associate Administrator for Planning at NASA headquarters. He accepts. He hates it. On May 26, 1972, von Braun resigns from NASA. He joins Fairchild Industries as Vice President of Engineering and Development. He continues working. He continues speaking publicly about space exploration. He continues his advocacy for a Mars mission that will never be funded in his lifetime. In early 1973, he is diagnosed with kidney cancer. He undergoes surgery. The cancer returns. He undergoes a second surgery. He continues working between treatments. June 16, 1977. Wernher von Braun dies at Alexandria Hospital, Virginia. Age 65. Cause of death, pancreatic cancer. President Jimmy Carter issues a statement. He calls von Braun a man of bold vision, who made an indispensable contribution to America's space program. The statement does not mention the SS. It does not mention Mittelwerk. It does not mention the 6,000 dead. The New York Times obituary runs to 47 column inches. Jean-Michel's book Dora, the memoir of prisoner 19,880, is mentioned in exactly 0 of them. Eileen Welsome's investigation wins the Pulitzer Prize for National Reporting in 1994. The work that began in a filing cabinet at the Albuquerque Tribune has become a 505-page book and a congressional investigation. President Bill Clinton establishes the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments in January 1994. The committee's final report, delivered October 1995, runs to 900 pages. It confirms what Welsome found. It adds details she did not have. And it formally acknowledges what the United States government had spent 50 years denying. But the radiation experiment report is only part of the story. The fuller declassification of Operation Paperclip itself comes in stages. 1984, JIOA records partially declassified at the National Archives. 1993, additional State Department files released. 1999, NASA historian Roger Launius formally acknowledges von Braun's SS membership in official NASA historical documentation, for the first time in the agency's 41-year history. 2013, historian Annie Jacobsen publishes Operation Paperclip, the secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to America. Based on 65,000 newly declassified documents, it becomes a New York Times bestseller. It is the most complete public account of the program ever assembled, and it confirms, in granular detail, what the JIOA, the War Department, and 4 successive American presidents allowed to happen. The question was never whether it could be hidden forever. The question was always, what does America do when it can no longer hide it? The answer, as it turned out, was both more complicated and more troubling than anyone expected. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum opens on April 22, 1993. Inside it, in the permanent exhibition, is a section on the Dora concentration camp and the Mittelwerk. The photographs are the ones taken by American soldiers of the 104th Infantry Division on April 11, 1945. The same photographs that went into the Judge Advocate General's war crimes files. The same files that existed simultaneously with the JIOA recruitment program. The same evidence that was never used. For the survivors of Dora, the ones still alive in 1993, the museum is something. But it is not justice. Yves Bayon, French prisoner, Dora survivor, prisoner number 23,392. Interviewed in 1995. He is asked whether he felt the American program was a betrayal. His answer is precise. It was not a betrayal of us specifically. We were already betrayed. It was a betrayal of the idea that what happened to us meant something. Of the approximately 60,000 prisoners who passed through the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp system between 1943 and 1945, 20,000 died. From exhaustion, starvation, execution, the deliberate violence of the SS guards. 0 of the senior engineers who ran the Mittelwerk production program were ever imprisoned for those deaths. 0. Here is the full accounting. What Operation Paperclip produced for the United States. The Redstone missile, America's first operational nuclear ballistic missile, deployed 1958. The Jupiter C rocket, launched America's first satellite, Explorer 1, 1958. The Pershing missile, NATO's primary theater nuclear weapon throughout the Cold War. Over 700 deployed across Western Europe by 1980. The Saturn V, still the most powerful rocket ever successfully flown. 13 launches. 13 successes, 0 failures. The Apollo program, 12 humans walked on the moon between 1969 and 1972. 24 humans traveled to lunar distance. All of them returned alive. And what it cost. 20,000 concentration camp prisoners dead at Dora and its subcamps. 9,000 civilians killed by V-2 strikes on London, Antwerp, and Paris. Federal law violated. Immigration statutes, executive orders, congressional oversight requirements, systematically and deliberately. 50 years of classified suppression of evidence that was always in American government files. No criminal prosecutions of any senior Mittelwerk engineer or manager brought by the United States government. Ever. The only man to face any consequence was Arthur Rudolph, and his consequence was a quiet flight to Hamburg at age 76. No trial. no prison, no public accountability. A two-paragraph press release. The Soviet version of Paperclip, Operation Osoaviakhim, produced its own results. The 2,200 German scientists taken in the October 1946 raids contributed to Soviet rocket development through approximately 1951. After that, the Soviets no longer needed them. Sergei Korolev had absorbed everything the Germans could teach. The German scientists were quietly repatriated to East Germany between 1951 and 1953. Unlike their American counterparts, they received no citizenship, no medals, no ticker tape parades. They were used and released. Here is the historical irony that nobody in either government wanted to acknowledge. Both space programs, American and Soviet, were built on the same German foundation. The same Peenemünde research, the same V2 combustion physics, the same guidance system mathematics. The Cold War space race, framed to the world as a competition between two opposing systems of civilization, was in significant part a competition between two groups of former Nazi rocket engineers to see whose adopted country could reach the moon first. The Americans got there first. Their engineers were better treated. Their engineers were better funded. Their engineers were not sent back. Operation Paperclip officially ended on September 30, 1947. In practice, the program continued under different names and different classifications until at least 1990. The final confirmed Paperclip recruit to retire from U.S. government service did so in 1990, 45 years after the program began. The institutional knowledge transferred through Paperclip did not end with the individuals. It was encoded into American aerospace doctrine, military systems architecture, and academic engineering curricula. It is present, untraceable, unacknowledged, in every American rocket that has flown since 1945. Wernher von Braun died on June 16, 1977, age 65. He never faced a war crimes investigation. He never gave public testimony about Mittelwerk. He never acknowledged in any public statement the deaths of the prisoners who built his rockets. His legacy remains formally celebrated at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama, where a full-scale Saturn V is displayed in his honor. Arthur Rudolph died in Hamburg, Germany on January 1, 1996, age 89. West Germany investigated him for war crimes after his return. The investigation was closed in 1987. Insufficient evidence to prosecute under German Statute of Limitations law. He died a free man. The Dora Mittelbau Memorial in Nordhausen, Germany, receives approximately 100,000 visitors per year. The names of 5,000 of the dead have been formally identified and recorded. The names of the remaining 15,000 are still unknown. They were prisoners from across occupied Europe, France, Poland, the Soviet Union, Belgium, the Netherlands. Many were brought to Mittelwerk with no documentation. They built rockets that killed civilians in Allied cities. Then they died in the tunnels. And then the men who put them there went to Alabama and built the rocket that went to the moon. That is the complete, unredacted story of Operation Paperclip. Nations make choices in the dark. Choices that are rational in the moment and monstrous in the reckoning. In 1945, the United States government made a choice. The choice was, winning matters more than accounting. The future matters more than the past. Our rockets matter more than their prisoners. That choice produced the Saturn V. That choice produced the moon landing. That choice also produced 50 years of classified suppression of evidence that was always sitting in American government files. It produced the quiet departure of Arthur Rudolph at age 76. It produced the 47-column-inch obituary that never mentioned the SS. It produced the two-paragraph press release. Operation Paperclip proves one thing with absolute clarity. Classified does not mean it didn't happen. It means someone decided you didn't need to know. The files were always there. The names were always there. The evidence was always there. It took a journalist at the Albuquerque Tribune with a filing cabinet and 4 years of evenings to bring it to the surface. That is not a story about the limits of secrecy. That is a story about the patience of truth. It does not expire. It does not get reclassified. It just waits. What other declassified stories should we cover next? Drop your suggestions below. Every file has a story. Most of them you were never supposed to hear. We'll see you in the next classified file.